Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday Brief here on Joy News on Multi TV. My name is Nia Krofi Smartabe. Coming up in this edition of the Midday Brief, lots of concerns have been raised about security. We'll gauge the views of some security experts on the security issue in the country. Concumbers and Bimobers in the northern region have agreed to smoke the peace pipe. We'll bring you some more on that, as well as some briefs and some wellness in this hour. Stay with us. First up, there have been concerns from many sectors that the security situation in Ghana is becoming volatile. Well, we caught up with KB Kwanson and Baladu Menu to ask them what they thought about the security situation in the country.
Here in Ghana, when there is hunger, we seldom link that with mayhem in the country. But it is a fertile grounds for insecurity. We as a country generally have misunderstood what national security is all about. When we talk about national security, what generally comes to mind is the activity of the police, the soldiers, and the BNI. Little do we think about even food security as an important and integral aspect of national security. So if we are in Ghana and we talk about security, one area we should be targeting is to ensure there is food, because the French have a saying that ventre affamé n'a pas d'oreille. Literally that a hungry person has no ears.
I don't go for that type of, in a situation where we are all culpable, to isolate one recalcitrant. It doesn't solve the problem. The media is part of it. We as citizens are part of it. Our politicians are part of it. See, there's a whole national problem that we should address with a holistic outlook. But in terms of our partisan approach, where objectivity becomes a casualty of a problem, because then we will always react to a problem according to who is saying what. And incidentally, it's so bad that people like us, oftentimes when we express an opinion on something, the first thing is, what is his background? Yeah. Not is there sense in what he's saying, but he served on the Kufuor, he served on the Rawlings. You see, another mindset we should deworm ourselves of that and look at our nation, what is going wrong. You see, so the security services can work better if the people are conscious. We protect our liberty by, first of all, doing the right thing ourselves and exposing those who are doing the wrong thing, both in the system and outside the system.
Away from the security situation, and of course you saw KB Kwanson, the last person, and of course earlier you saw Baladu Menu, a former MP as well, commenting on food security and other security concerns. But away from that, the district chief executive of the Sola Tuna Kalba district, Mumuni Isaac Dramani, has expressed worry about the onset of galamsey activities near the Black Volta at Bali. According to him, the activity could potentially affect the volume of water flowing into the Bui Dam, thus impacting electricity production at the dam. He made the observation at a meeting with assembly members at Sola in the northern region, from where Rafiq Salam sent this report. Addressing the 47-member assembly at its first ordinary meeting, the district chief executive Mumuni Dramani expressed worry at the sprawling galamsey activities in the district. He warned persons engaged in the illegal activity to desist or face the full rigors of the law.
This activity not only illegal in nature, but also has the potential of preventing substantial volumes of water flowing into the Bui Dam for generating electricity to the nation. This illegal mining activity has been brought to the attention of the research and the national security, compelling the district security committee, that is DICE, to visit the place on 2 occasions.
The DCE was also worried about the falling standard of education, even though he says more than half of the Assembly's budget is spent on improving education in the district. He announced that as a short-term measure, the Assembly will work towards increasing the number of teachers sponsored for higher education and will also review the sponsorship package for teachers to attract more of them to the district. He appealed to the District Directorate of Education to intensify its monitoring and supervision of schools to scale down teacher absenteeism. Rafiq Salam's report from Sola in the Northern Region. Well, on to some other story now. President John Mahama is expected to lead a special cabinet meeting today to set new benchmarks. In attendance will be all cabinet ministers as well as others whose activities have direct relationship with the various facets of the economy. It is also expected that the challenge posed by the fuel subsidies to the economy provision, energy provision, and how to revamp the industrial sector will dominate the discussions. According to sources within government, the session will concentrate, amongst others, on issues of how to enhance the capacity of the private sector to engineer growth and address challenges identified at the end of the first quarter of this year. Contributions of the mining sector to the economy and the effects thereof of activities of Galamsey will also be in focus. It is expected that by close of the session, clear benchmarks for growth, stability of how the city and inflation, amongst others, will also be set. Meanwhile, government begins its daily briefing of the media today at the Flagstaff House. The briefing session, according to the Information Ministry, will be a platform for government to disseminate information about government's activities to the public. Away from the cabinet, the Africa Development Programme says the recent news about the delay in release of grants and other support needed for the smooth running of the over 30 special schools in Ghana is very troubling and an affront to government's quest to promote social protection. This was contained in a release signed by the programme's director of the ADP, Charles Othniel Abbey. He noted that these schools are attended by students who are also Ghanaians and are entitled to enjoy all the fundamental human rights enshrined in the 1992 Constitution. Well, Charles Othniel Abbey joins me in the studio now to give us to talk more about the grant and the impact of it's having on the special schools. Good afternoon to you, Charles, and thanks for joining me in the studio.
I'm glad you're having me.
Okay, now first of all, are you able to ascertain what the teething problem or the root of the problem is?
Indeed, it is important to note that these special schools of themselves, unlike the mainstream secondary schools who have students paying tuition fees, it is not the case with the special schools. And for the very fact that they are to cater for some vulnerable and excluded sectors of society, it now becomes the responsibility of governments to cater for them. So like the conference they had in Kumasi recently pointed out, their release have been in arrears for some time, and it is almost a yearly syndrome. And we think that moving forward as a country, we need to take critical look at issues of social protection and social development.
So, but you are saying that the fact that their grant haven't been given, it amounts to a neglect by government. What makes you think so?
You see,
it probably could be just a case of delayed disbursement of the grant.
If you could recall the story you just did before this one, where there's going to be a cabinet meeting, and clearly issues of economic development are the frontline issues. More or less, issues of social development are matters that we give little concern to. If you recall, in 2012, Daily Guide did a story about the Bogatanga Rehabilitation Center for Disabled Persons. The fact that for 2 years running, the school has virtually come to its knees due to the fact that infrastructure and other things needed to train these segments of society are lacking. And it was just an instance of what is happening. If you go to WA School for the Deaf now, you find that they have problems with feeding. Go and see the quantity of food that are served to these brothers of ours, and you ask yourself, is it that they find themselves in these situations so the rest of the larger society is less concerned about it? And mind you, if you look at the global projections as far as the population dynamics are concerned, for these segments of society we consider them to be minority groups, their numbers are increasing, and it tells us that the earlier we tune up the measures to take care of these people and all of us by extension, the better for us as a society.
So you would have government rather focus on these special schools and not education in broader terms, or what exactly?
You see, their issue has highlighted an important component of social protection.
But we now have a ministry that has social protection attached to it.
And I think we all as a society have not interrogated deeply the issues of social protection. And I think that this issue gives us the opportunity to deepen the discourse.
So what are the issues that we should have seen whilst talking about social protection that we haven't seen?
You see, social protection seems to tell all of us that you have a mix of activities and support systems in place to cater for the various segments of society. So, for instance, today our brothers and sisters in Kantamanto who got their wares destroyed, they belong to families. They feed families. People are dependent on them. For the next 2 months until they get back to normal business, poverty is not an event. It's something, sometimes you slip in and out of it. Now, with their source of livelihood taken away from them through this disaster, we have a responsibility as a people and as a government to see how we can help them cope within these 2 months. The children they feed, the schools they attend, who is going to take care of their fees? Some, sleep at those places. What happens to them? And so, with the creation of the renaming, rather, of the Ministry for Women and Children Affairs into a Gender, Children and Social Protection was something those of us in the social development perspective welcomed it. But we cautioned it should not become, a cosmetic approach. This is about time that the National Social Protection Strategy document, which has been in its draft stages since 2007 and has been concluded upon, we move the agenda beyond it being a document. And for instance, let me give you one critical input. There's something we are supposed to have called the National Social Protection Floor. Just as organized labor meets with government and they have a minimum wage, when we constitute the process towards a national social protection floor, we as a country, looking at our fiscal resources and the challenges we have, will agree on minimum level of benefits or entitlements.
When was the last time you met on this platform? I mean, this social protection group of people,
in fact,
to agree on how to roll out social protection.
The discussions have not even started for the National Social Protection Floor. We are confident that with these issues coming up recently, we'll be able to partner the Ministry for Gender, Children and Social Protection and other stakeholders within the social development framework so we can initiate the discussions for the social protection floor. Because today, it is not you, it is somebody else, but tomorrow you cannot tell. Issues of the aged, the elderly, orphans, all these are issues that bother us as a society. And when we have the National Social Protection Floor initiative discussions ongoing, where we are able to agree on a minimum set of entitlements persons within each of these categories is entitled to, you have a more coordinated approach so that when a disaster occurs like the Kantamanto one, and 1 week now, we are still not sure whether the needs assessment has been concluded and what has happened to those persons, then it's like it happens, we talk about it, and we go back to sleep. And we think this is an opportune time to initiate the discussions for the National Social Protection Floor.
Okay, now let's go back to the issue of the special schools.
Okay.
Who are we expecting to lead the front for them now that we have the Gender, Children and Social Protection Ministry? And then, of course, the Education Ministry.
Sure.
They fall under the Education Ministry, don't they?
Right.
But can the Gender, Children and Social Protection Ministry and NGOs in social protection like yourself, what are you doing to help them? Because right now, as it stands, the information we have is that the schools have been shut down until further notice, until grants are given. They are not going to go back to school.
The multi-stakeholder approach is essential where all these government agencies you have mentioned is concerned. But we are making, by way of a proposal, that one core issue with their release of funds has to do with feeding. Where they have to cook for their students. Now, you know, we have this Ghana school feeding program ongoing.
And they part of the school feeding program?
No, that is the interesting aspect of it. So in a research ADP did concerning the school feeding in Upper West region, we recommended to the stakeholders, and we sent a copy of the report to the Ghana school feeding program regional office, that by way of a policy, you know, the special schools should be drafted into the school feeding arrangements, so that whereas governments would be faced with the difficulty of releasing the funds on time to help their feeding, if it is under the school feeding program arrangement, then there is some leeway where you can make use of economies of scale.
But even, sorry to cut in, but even with a school feeding
it's
program,
once a day.
Yeah, exactly.
But
so then how do they feed them?
They are fed
in the
3
evenings,
times,
especially those who are boarders.
Good. So, you know, World Food Program has been partnering NGOs up in the north to also pilot what they call the homegrown school feeding concept. And so they provide food ingredients for these schools to augment what they do already in the schools. So if you have the government's bringing on board all these schools onto the Ghana school feeding program, which offers 1 meal a day, then we can appeal to the World Food Program and other international organizations who are already in the school feeding concepts to help support the other aspect of the meals. So you realize that we'll be having a solution for the feeding aspect.
That's a solution for the feeding,
yes.
But how about the other financial aspects that the school needs to, or financial obligations they need to fulfill?
You and I know
for
that
paying the teachers.
You and I know that resources are not finite, and so to the extent that you are able to free some resources which would have gone into the feeding of these students by way of courting institutional support and donor agencies to help tackle that aspect, then the resources available grows, you know, notionally, and so you are able to reprioritize and, you know, devote these funds to other critical sectors. And we think that it is one key area we can look at as a people as a forward march solution.
Okay, finally, what are you expecting government to do in this particular case? Seeing as the school heads are saying, well, until funds are released to us, sorry, but the children will have to stay home.
I would want to recommend that when we have been told that the president and his cabinet will be meeting, is it this afternoon or
today?
Yeah, today.
Probably should have started,
yes,
or maybe later in the day.
We know that Nano Yelitha, with all her years of experience in development work, would raise this issue up at the cabinet level, so that as a matter of priority, they can get some resources. I mean, yes, the president told us that the meat is left to the bone. And so once they are the managers of the meat, they can tell us what resources can get, so that as a matter of priority, we can take care of these brothers of ours. But come to think of it, we have a minister for chieftaincy and cultural affairs who, you know, although is visually impaired, look at the height he has attained. It is a motivation for these brothers and sisters of ours, and we can't neglect or renege on our responsibilities as a people.
But in the interim, I know I said that was the final question, but in the interim, can't organizations like yours, for instance, and other allied ones come together at least and probably help them with finances for the time being, so that school can reopen, they can go back to school, whilst government manages the meat to ensure that they also get their share of the meat?
Indeed, this also calls for the collaboration of civil society, the media and NGO, like we are doing and bringing out the issues. I would want to recommend that if we can have another stakeholder, another opportunity where we can have some, for instance, World Food Program, we can initiate those discussions, and on behalf of these special schools, we'll try and liaise with these World Food Program bodies, because if you recall, when Ghana had a food crisis in late 2008, 2007, 2008, you know, they came to our aid with some food aid. So this is about time that we would want to appeal to them. They've always been generous when their appeal goes, and we want to thank you for this medium, and we want to appeal to them that they come to the aid of these special schools. At least in-kind support would very much help at this time, whilst we pile up the public advocacy and pressure on governments to release the funds. Not that allocations have not been made. These are allocations that are to be made, but the funds have been delayed, and it is unacceptable.
Okay, Charles Osnealbe, thank you very much. He is with the Africa Development Program, and of course we've been talking about the close down, or if you like, the closure of special schools across the country, over 30 of them, because of delayed disbursement of funds. But in other stories, the Canadian Governor-General, Right Honourable David Johnston, has ended his 4-day state visit to Ghana. President John Mahama held a farewell ceremony for the governor earlier today. President Mahama presented gifts to the Governor-General on behalf of the people of Ghana, plus an autographed copy of his book, My First Coup d'etat. The President was joined by some Ministers of State, including the Greater Accra Regional Minister, Julius Deborah, Defence Minister Mark Wayongo, Trade Minister Haruna Idrisu, and Education Minister Professor Nana Opoku-Agyeman to bid Right Honourable David Johnston farewell. The Canadian Governor-General's visit facilitated bilateral discussions and agreements between the two countries. Issues discussed largely centered around education and trade. He also held talks with the Asantehene Otumfuo II. Governor-General David Johnston and his entourage are en route to Botswana and South Africa. Okay, so we bid adieu to the Canadian Governor-General, Bon Voyage. Apart from that, the Commission of Inquiry established by His Excellency President John Mahama to inquire into judgment debt payments and other related matters will resume public sittings on Monday, May 20, 2013. The underlisted institutions and persons will appear before the Commission on the above-mentioned date to assist the Commission in its work. The Chief Executive or representative of the Irrigation Development Authority, Nana Owusu Echao Prempe II, the Solicitor General, however, the Commission wishes to remind the general public that public sittings would be held at 10 a.m. each day. Members of the public who wish to testify or volunteer information are first to report at the Commission's office to give their statements. The Commission will then schedule a date for them to give evidence. All those who intend to testify or volunteer information to the Commission but are unable to be present in person are requested to submit memoranda to the Commission. All such memoranda will be treated confidentially. Public Relations Officer for the Commission, William Dove, said that in a statement released earlier. Do stay with us on the Midday Brief. We have some more stories coming up. Now to the courts. The Financial Division of the Fast Track High Court has rejected a request by the Attorney General's Department and the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission to join the suit in which the National Labour Commission (NLC) has sued the Ghana Medical Association over the latter's strike. According to the court, allowing the two bodies to join the suit would protract the case. It rather advised the AG's department and the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission to be on the negotiating table with the GMA to resolve the impasse. Last week, the court issued a one-week ultimatum to the NLC, the GMA and the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission to agree on a payment schedule on the conversion differences for doctors. But when the case was called yesterday, the parties had not reached an agreement as directed by the court. That compelled the presiding judge, Justice John Ajet Nassam, to adjourn the case to June 6, 2013 and directed the parties to resolve their differences by that date. The court, at an earlier sitting, had refused a one-month request by the NLC for the GMA and the Fair Wages Salary Commission to agree on the schedule for payment.